There's a time and a place for magical thinking. It's imagination. It's creativity. It's thinking of worlds that don't exist, but maybe they should. But there's a time for reality too. There's a time to know the difference between what we want to be and what is, what we hope could be, and what we have to work to make real. Part of the challenge that we find going through life, whether it's looking back at Jewish tradition or looking forward into the future or looking around at the world around us, is that it seems to us, at least, that far too many people don't draw that line between what's imagination and what's real, what they want and what is. It's the lure of magical thinking. But it's very natural. It's very much a part of our psychological makeup. After all, we who don't follow this so-called magical thinking are the minority. Most of the world, at least most of the United States, doesn't agree with us. I want to tell you a story I've told once or twice before, so I apologize for those who remember it. A person who grew up in a very religious community realized that he just didn't believe it anymore. And he was grappling with this crisis in faith. And so he went out into the fields one day, and he looked up at the sky and he said, "All right, God, if you're out there, show me a sign." And a shooting star went right across the sky. And he said to himself, "Wow, what a coincidence." Now, this is the line between magical thinking, that the universe will respond if I call out and say, "Give me a sign right now," and there it is, and what we might call realistic thinking of the odds of that happening seem small, but it's the same evidence, right? A religious thinker will interpret it one way, and someone who's looking at statistics and probability might interpret it very differently. Now, what do I mean by magical thinking? I don't mean imagination when you know you're imagining, like in that wonderful song. I don't mean yelling at the television while watching a sporting event. We know it won't make a difference, especially if it's an away game, right? There's no chance they're going to hear us a long ways away. But if you think that wearing your lucky jersey makes a difference, or that avoiding certain foods on game day will make a difference. I was listening to Sports Talk Radio just this week, and somebody was commenting that his team won the last time he watched the game because he happened to be in the bathroom when the first two innings happened. And so he decided he needed to be in the bathroom for every first two innings for the rest of the playoffs because who knows, maybe. That's magical thinking. It's getting knowledge or making things happen beyond a natural sense of cause and effect, or at least thinking that that's happening. And there are plenty of examples of superstitions that we're familiar with that people, think could have an effect or could have a bad effect, and they're the kind of things that you would want to avoid. And so what I'd like to do is actually to take a list. People can brainstorm some, and again, those online can drop in the chat if they want to. What are some examples of superstitions that you've heard of? And then we'll go back and take a look and ask, why is that tempting? So what are some examples of superstitions that you've heard? The black cat, okay. All right, step on a crack. I heard break a mirror. All right. Rabbit's foot. Horseshoe, wishbone, salt over shoulder. I'm sorry, was there another one? I'm sure there are a couple in the chat. A cut onion under the bed to prevent influenza. Okay, that's. Yes, number 13 in general, or the 13th floor. In Jewish life, you have the concept of the evil eye, right? Or pu, or Kena hora, avoid, this is another word for the evil eye. 18 is good luck, because it's numerically related to the word chai, which means life. 2, not 3, right? There's a sort of an allergy to censuses or counting things lest you be too proud, right?
William said crossing fingers.
Knock on wood, crossing your fingers, right? For luck. Okay. So why are these things, why might these be tempting to believe in something like this? What do these do that either avoid or enable that you might want to believe in them? Okay, so you feel like you have some power over things? Maybe some hope, right? That things might turn out for the best? Yep, so some of it's based on a misperception of things. You know, if your soul comes out when you sneeze, you got to put it back in. And so you say, bless you. That's why in a lot of languages, actually, they say health instead. So in Yiddish, it'd be sei gesund or sei gesinnt, depending where you're from, or Gesundheit in German, same idea. And la briut is the Hebrew phrase, which also just means to your health. What are some other reasons? There was a hand in the back I saw. So it's both avoiding accountability. It's not my fault. It was just bad luck. But also, it's a way of explaining why bad things happen, right? If I didn't take the precautions, then obviously I must have done something wrong. There's actually a rabbinic legend about one of the origins of Hanukkah that connects with the Torah portion of this week, actually, which is the Torah portion of Bereshit, the first one at the beginning of Genesis, chapter 1 through chapter 5 or so. And it's the creation of the world with Adam. And in this midrash, this commentary, it imagines that the first time Adam was facing this season, when it gets darker earlier and the days are shorter and shorter and shorter, he thought, oh no, this is how I die. Remember, he was told he's going to die if he eats from the tree, and he ate from the tree, and he figures maybe this is it. The whole world's going to go out. And so he decided that after the solstice passed and the light began to get bigger and bigger, that maybe that's the way the world works. But when the light was getting smaller, he decided he needed to light more lights. So one night he lit one light, and then the next night he lit 2 lights, and then 3 lights and 4 lights, hopefully to get the sun to burn brighter by imitation or to compensate for the darkness. You see the connection with a holiday that happens this time of year when it gets darker out, right? This is one of those origin stories for Hanukkah. But it's all based on this premise of, if I did it the first year and it worked, well, maybe I better keep doing it, otherwise the sun might go out the next time I don't. So that's definitely part of these superstitions. Any other thoughts on why these are attractive? Yeah. Yeah, so this is just for those online, she was summarizing the psychological idea of external attribution, where you attribute to something beyond yourself. You're more likely to continue to do that because it's less accountable to you, but also less controllable by you. Yeah. Right. If you do believe in evil spirits, the world is a terrible place. But if you have a way to counteract the evil spirits, maybe you can go out and live your life, or have children, or make progress in the world, or even risk things that you might not otherwise. So, please. Yes, the concept of cosmic justice. We love a system where there is justice, and to see the world is to experience a world that doesn't have that justice in it. So sometimes we would rather blame ourselves than accept a world that's not fair. So if we suffer, we must have done something wrong. That's fair. And likewise, we can avoid suffering if we do the right things, whoever has told us what's right. And I think the other temptation to it, part of us is always 6 or 7 years old, and we want the gold star. We want someone to be watching what we're doing and approving of us and keeping track of it and rewarding us for it at some point. You know, and whether it's an ice cream sundae in this life or an ice cream sundae bar in the next life, hopefully someone's keeping score. We want a system where someone's keeping score, and we'll get our just desserts. Get the pun? We'll get our just desserts at the end. So this is why we construct the system like this, because it fits with our minds and how we like to work. And that's very adaptive, by the way. For a social creature like human beings are, to have an innate system of justice where we want things to be fair helps us function as a group. But then we project it onto the universe, and that's where it gets much more complicated. That's where you get witch hunts. That's where you get after-death rituals, the pharaohs and the Chinese emperors, and all those accoutrements built onto that system that at its root has an adaptation for positive results, but may also have some corollaries to it that are problematic. In fact, many evolutionary biologists describe that kind of phenomenon as a spandrel. Those who are familiar with architecture might have heard of a spandrel. It's a space that's created by accident when you're doing something else. Like you build a staircase that creates a space under the staircase you can use for storage or a closet. It's not by design, but it comes out as sort of a side result that can be positive if you use it positively. And there are these, the idea is that our brains, our psychology has these kind of spandrels where positive features wind up with side effects that we didn't quite imagine would be there, or again, since nobody's designing this, they weren't the positive benefit, they just came along with for the ride. So for example, we have an innate sense that something happens is caused by something else, by some kind of agency. Now that's very useful to understand seasons, to understand how to grow better crops, how to find the animals when they're migrating, right? We learn a lot from expecting things to be caused, but that also means we might think the lightning was caused by something, or the earthquake, or the famine, or the pestilence, right? Or the disease that someone faces. It must have been caused by something. Well, that's where we get into this blame and justice world. Or we have a phenomenon of personification. You see leaves rustling, and you imagine there's some agent, some animal, some person doing that. Now, the advantage to doing that is if there is a jaguar hiding in the bushes, you are more likely to be running away. On the other hand, if it was just the wind, you ran away for nothing. But given the cost-benefit analysis, your risk reward, better to run away for nothing than to get caught by the jaguar. But this sometimes leads to us personifying other things in the world as if there's a personality behind them when there may not be. So it may be that a lot of the thoughts we have, whether it's what we call superstition or what we might even call supernatural religion, has this kind of a spandrel origin. It comes out of the world of other features of our psychology. But we also find that some of this magical thinking comes from our desires. We want to do something. And so we find a way to do it, whether it's real or the world of pure imagination. And some of our desires that lead to this magical thinking, we're going to look at tonight. So I'm going to look at 3 examples, and some of them we already touched on a little bit. The first desire is the desire for control. If you lived 50,000 years ago, what would be some of the features of life that you would want to control? Okay, so maintaining what you have or what your group has, more likely in a clan travel setting. Food supply, rain. Keep the fire going, that's right. Just general safety. Protection against storms, disease. You need shelter of some kind. Well, people had disease. They might not have known what caused it, right? They might have thought it was demonic possession or something, but they'd want to control the phenomenon of these people all of a sudden start coughing and then things go downhill. Right, one drops dead, the person that cared for them drops dead, right, it becomes a plague. Control external threats. You want to keep other dangerous groups away from you. I don't know how many of you have seen the early 80s movie Quest for Fire, which was a French movie that was designed to sort of be set 50,000 or 100,000 years ago, pre-language in many cases, with differing groups of hominids warring against each other. It really is a fascinating window into that time period. Again, it's imagination, but it's based on archaeology and anthropology. But it really gives you a fascinating window into that world where you just can't control so many things of your life. And that's why you're sort of tempted into that kind of magical thinking. But after all, we're still interested in trying to control things, and sometimes not always in rational ways, even today. What are some examples of magical thinking that address that need of control that people look at today? Heaven. The idea of a heaven, okay. Prayer, right? If you're looking for intercession or intervention, for sure. Trying to predict the future, right? Could be astrology, astronomy, tarot. We have astrology on the chat. Thank you, Brian. People who want to know the future in many ways, by the way. That includes the weather. That includes political polling. I mean, given the realities of polling today, it's as much, I mean, maybe slightly more reliable than tarot cards, but I wouldn't put it too far above that. Now, I'm not discounting that there are things we do not understand yet fully, or that we don't know exactly how they work. And there are certainly things that provide a psychological relief. I'm not an expert on the issue of acupuncture, for example. There are some people who are convinced it's quackery, and there are some people who are convinced it's effective and that it's based on, centuries of Chinese practice in medicine and so on. I'm agnostic on the question. It certainly provides relief for people for whom it provides relief. But the question is, when we're asking, is this magical thinking or not, we want to know, A, does it really work? And B, how does it work? And if your technique or your idea for controlling things either will not allow itself to be tested, or has no way to explain how it actually works in the world, then to me, it falls over that line into magical thinking, and we need to rely on something a little bit more tangible and understandable. So that's one of those needs we try to address with magical thinking, is to try to control things. The next one is the need for attention, or ego. I was once in a car traffic jam when I was still living in Detroit. So this was shortly after my undergraduate studies. And as I was sitting in this traffic jam, I looked around and I saw all these other cars with all these other people in them. And all of a sudden I had a flash realization. Maybe this was my egocentrism, but I realized that these people had no idea that I existed. I did not mean a thing to them, and I didn't know who they were. They were living in their own world with their families and their friends and their work, society, and community. They were living without me. And how, what? Now, again, maybe some people get past that stage at 8, okay? or at 12. But we all start with this, what I call a meocentric theory of the universe. You know, originally the geocentric theory was that the Earth was in the middle and everything revolved around it, including the sun. Well, a lot of people have this meocentric theory of the universe, that everything has to revolve around them or be able to have an impact on them or be focused on them in some way, that the cosmic position of the stars have an impact on their life specifically. There's a wonderful parody song by Weird Al Yankovic called Your Horoscope for Today, where he has a sort of chorus in the middle where he says, now, you might find it a little bit inconceivable that the relative position of planets and stars have a special deep significance that applies to only you. But in some ways, that's part of that meocentric theory of the universe, that sure, I'm important enough and everything should apply to me. Now, this meocentric theory starts when we're very little. Have you ever played peekaboo with a 2-year-old, right? If they can't see you, it's like you're not there. Now, if you can't see them, it's like, you know, it's that idea of object permanence. That's something we learn, where if you hide something, it's not that it disappears and dematerializes just because you can't perceive it. It's still there. And they can learn to look behind you and find the hidden pen. We need a balance, of course. There's a balance of healthy self-importance. We are important in very important ways, but also a value of perspective. I once had a poster on my wall that was a picture of the Milky Way galaxy and an arrow pointing to one little dot that said, "You are here." That gives you some perspective on your place in the universe. So on one hand, you might feel insignificant from that. But on the other hand, you might say, are my problems really that important? I mean, on a cosmic scale, it doesn't matter anyways. And so maybe I can, you know, let go of this particular challenge I'm grappling with. There's a famous story of a Hasidic rabbi who suggested that we should have 2 slips of paper, one in each pocket. One slip would say, "For my sake, the world was created." And the other slip would say, "I am nothing but dust and ashes." And we have to live in between those two. I'm a dot and the end of the Milky Way, or I'm the center of the universe. And there are different times where somewhere in between those two extremes is the appropriate place to live. After all, it's very hard for us to imagine a world without us in it. We've never experienced that world. By definition, we can't experience a world without us in it. And so it's hard for us to conceive it, and then we think we're more important perhaps than we are, but also it's nice to think sometimes that the light did not turn red just to spite you, even if it feels that way. So what are some examples of magical thinking that people follow today that address that need of ego and of importance? Right, so we want to minimize someone's self-importance so they have a reasonable level on it. And that's an important counteraction to this. Yeah, we are.
Yeah, sometimes it's just easier to ignore it in a nice way.
Yes, well, we do have to not let us get caught up in their ego trips. So what are some examples of this magical thinking that appeals to our egos? Yeah, so social media has its own interesting impact on this idea of perception and how important we are, and we see other people's lives as they've chosen to show them. You know, it's a limited view. It's like reality television is not reality. It's a kind of television. And the same is true on social media. It's what people have chosen to share, and we extrapolate from that to imagine that's what their whole life is, and then we create unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Well, I think the third area to look at is really the most challenging for us, and that is the area of knowledge. We want to know, we want to understand how things work. Why things really happen may be more complicated than a very visible cause and effect. You know, we've learned that through molecular biology and through atomic theory, and it's actually more complicated than we have ever imagined. Think about how we get knowledge in the age of social media. You can do what's called crowdsourcing, where you put the word out there, who knows how to solve this problem? And you get voices from all over the place, and you have to sift through who's believable and who's not. Now, you also get authorities who will tell you the real truth. But sometimes an authority tells you what they think is true, and you decide they don't know what they're talking about. And so you decide to find out for yourself. And then you're at the mercy of what the results will be. Someone comments on the chat, an example of that ego result would be somebody with tremendous fame talking about how they made it because they wanted it badly enough, as if there weren't other people who also wanted it really badly. And I saw an earlier one, not having baby showers for Jewish moms. It's another one of those trying to control things. Other examples of this knowledge problem is an authority tells you something, you don't believe them, you try to find out another answer, and maybe you decide authorities just don't know what the truth is, or they know what the truth is, and they don't want to tell you what the truth is. And this leads to this kind of conspiracy thinking. Now, you know, there's an old saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. So just because it's unlikely that there's a conspiracy to withhold knowledge from people, that does happen, absolutely. You know, think about going back to the Gulf of Tonkin incident that started the Vietnam War escalation, or you think about the tobacco industry lying about the effects of tobacco on cancer rates for decades. Authorities, doctors participated in that process of dissembling. I mean, are we really supposed to be trusting big pharma now? Like that we trust that they're going to tell the truth all the time? Well, this is the dilemma we're in. You see, we want to know, but we also have a suspicion of authority, and we think that maybe there's a secret truth that somebody doesn't want us to know. That might open that door to the magical thinking of the secret knowledge. Once you have secret knowledge, that enables secret power. So some examples of magical thinking to find secret knowledge. Horoscopes, right? I already mentioned. Tarot cards, right? You have to know how to read the cards, or reading your palms, or tea leaves, or all these other phenomena of reading the signs. There actually was a practice in the ancient Near East of, the fancy term for it is extispicy, which means you read the guts of an animal. You pray over the animal and sacrifice it, and you cut it open, you examine its liver and its other pancreas and other organs, and then the priest will know what certain signs would be on a particular organ. That was a sign of, again, knowledge, of understanding what's happening now or what might happen in the future. Reading dreams. See, in the past, we imagined dreams were about the future. Read the Joseph story, right? Today, we think dreams are about the present or the past. It's a very different understanding of dreams. We still read them, but it's looking in a different direction. Oh, but those are true. Okay. You've even got reading auras or chakras. I mean, this is all part of this phenomenon of knowledge, trying to understand somebody. Going for a reading in Scientology is, again, trying to understand your true spiritual self. Okay, taking mind-altering drugs for trips, and maybe you're opening your doors to new understandings of yourself, and maybe you're just activating some parts of your brain that are going to make you see things that never happened in life and never did. So, and never will. Right. This is the balancing act of these. Although there are some interesting research projects being done even now on psycho-altering drugs that are actually, opening windows into parts of ourselves we forgot. So it's a cutting-edge area. Again, it still remains to be studied, but not to rely on it, unthinkingly. Yeah, right. I mean, reading tea leaves, coffee leaves, and it begins to take on its own momentum when you get one person that does it who you trust, and then someone else does it, and you might want to explore some more. Well, this is the question we have to ask. What harm does it do? Right? if you're going to see your relative who does a tea leaf reading, or you open your fortune cookie and see, I mean, how many people here have opened their fortune cookie just to see what's in the fortune cookie? Of course you do. So that's, that's for fun. Or you read the horoscope in the paper. Oh, that's funny. I remember once when I was in college, I wrote a bunch of joke horoscopes in the paper, like you'll have a lot of homework and you won't get it all done. And someone read this and they said, and at first they said, wow, that's so accurate. Because we're in college. And then she read the next one and it also ended with, you'll have a lot of homework and you won't get it all. And she said, oh, I get it. Okay. But that's the thing with horoscopes. They very rarely will write a horoscope that says you're a terrible person and nobody likes you. Because that's not what we want to hear. We're less likely to believe it. That's part of the reading process. Yeah, it was dangerous to be a black cat. Absolutely, in those periods. The magical thinking, right? The magical thinking takes on a life of its own. It becomes like a Frankenstein monster, a golem that runs on and runs amok. One other example of this knowledge, magical thinking, is a phenomenon called intelligent design. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's part of the arguments over teaching evolution or alternate theories of evolution. But intelligent design is basically based on the premise that you follow things down through natural processes and evolutionary science. And then you get to a certain point where all you can write is, then a miracle happened. It's that there's what they call irreducible complexity. There's just no way that this could have evolved other than, of course, what that really does is short circuit science, because you could do that at any point in any scientific process and say, well, we don't know how this happened, so we're done. Must be God. And, intelligent design scientists have not produced any vaccines. They have not had any breakthroughs in studying how species have changed. It's a way out of the problem of dealing with evolution vis-a-vis their sense of creation. It's another kind of magical thinking. And so one of the harms that we have seen from magical thinking is that it can lead to its own disasters. We also know that it can lead to exploitation. People are taken advantage of. A relative giving you a free coffee leaf reading is not a big deal. But some people take money and take a lot of money for doing this. There's a wonderful book by a magician. His name is James Randi. He wrote a book called The Faith Healers, where he investigated a series of these charismatic faith healers who were preying on people, EY, to get their money and to take advantage of them when the person themselves knew they were faking it. And Randy could figure this out because he was a magician. And magic is all about tricking people and getting them to think one thing when it isn't. Magicians will tell you there is no real magic. They do not make things dematerialize. They've just hidden them from your view, right? So, the artistry is in how they do that. In fact, there was a fantastic show on TV for just a year, and then the Magicians Guild got it canceled. It was how they do the magic. And they would show the trick, and then they would show you from behind so you could see how the trick was done, and then they would do it again so you could now see how. The Magicians Guild hated that particular thing. But the point is that a magician knows that there is no real magic in that sense, but he can see when someone's taking advantage of people who don't realize what's being done. And we also have to remember that sometimes someone who claims the ability to do this magical stuff or with magical knowledge claims authority. And when they have that authority, that can be exploited. Someone who can provide you that secret knowledge, who claims that control, someone who affirms how cosmically important you are, can then tell you what to do and not only take advantage of you financially, but also in many other interpersonal ways. Another challenge with magical thinking is that it leaves you susceptible to other beliefs without evidence or even despite evidence. It's not an accident that people susceptible to magical thinking might get involved in other conspiracy ideas because, again, it's secret knowledge, it's secret power, it's secret powers controlling your life that you don't understand. Same kind of phenomenon. We also realize on the positive side, there's a skill that we've learned called I don't know. It's very good to be able to say, I don't know. It's a position of strength. There's a dignity in accepting sometimes I don't know, or maybe it's beyond my control. And I can't be sure absolutely this is going to turn out the way I want it. Think of that famous serenity prayer where it's asking a God to do it, but we can ask ourselves to do it, to have the serenity to accept that which we cannot control, the courage to change that which we can control, and the wisdom to know the difference. So we're not beating our head against the wall, but also we're willing to act when we have the chance to act. We also realize that there's the tangible progress of challenging magical thinking for real. It's a never-ending exploration. It opens up all kinds of possibilities and wonder. It is a world of imagination because we have to imagine, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And how can I help deal with the problem? We had a wonderful passage in our service from Robert Ingersoll. I want to conclude with another one by him. We have already compared the benefits of theology and science. When the theologian governed the world, it was covered with huts and hovels for the many, palaces and cathedrals for the few. To nearly all the children of men, reading and writing were unknown arts. The poor were clad in rags and skins, they devoured crusts and gnawed bones. The day of science dawned, and the luxuries of a century ago are the necessities of today. People in the middle ranks of life have more of the convenience and elegancies than the princes and kings of the theological times. But above and over all of this is the development of mind. There is more of value in the brain of an average person of today, of a master mechanic, of a chemist, a naturalist, an inventor, than there was in the brain of the world 400 years ago. These blessings did not fall from the skies. These benefits did not drop from the outstretched hands of priests. They were not found in cathedrals or behind altars, neither were they searched for with holy candles. They were not discovered by the closed eyes of prayer, nor did they come in answer to superstitious supplication. They are the children of freedom, the gifts of reason, the observation of experience, and for them all, people are indebted to other people. That's the power of non-magical thinking.